Imagine that you're in high school and you have your entire future ahead of you, and then all of a sudden, bam, a car wreck changes your life. And not any ordinary car wreck like a fender bender. No, we're talking about a car wreck where you have to learn how to re-walk again. Like, that's how severe this car wreck was. Well, it turns out this actually happened to a good friend of mine. But during this car wreck, during this very dark time in his life, he learned a great skill, and that skill was photography. What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. So I've got a special treat. A good friend of mine, a very successful photographer. His name is David Molnar, and I've had a chance to hang out with him a lot of time before he moved away from the Nashville area, currently living down in Seaside, Florida, loving the surfing life. This guy loves the ocean. But David wanted to come on the podcast and the YouTube channel to share his story and also inspire anybody that is interested not only in photography, but also chasing your dreams, chasing your passion. And even though I've known David for a number of years, I got to learn a side of his story that I didn't know, and you're going to love his story. I mean, I promise you, you're going to love his story. So without further ado, here is David Molnar, your photography mentor. What's going on, y'all? So I've got a good friend of mine who we actually haven't talked in a while, so this is kind of fun. We've already had a few jokes, and but his name is David Molnar. And for those that are listening to this on the podcast, it is an injustice because this guy, I mean, one, he's like so good looking. Somehow his eye color matches his shirt, which he always wears this color shirt. And we can talk about that here in a minute. But this guy is a photographer, master punner. Is that a word? Punner, the master of puns.
Sure. Yeah, that works.
YouTuber, online course creator, digital creator. I mean, family guy, surfer, and also fellow 7 on the Enneagram. So we're just represent.
Yeah.
But he's got an exciting thing that he wanted to talk about, which we'll get to near the end of this. But first, man, I would love for people that don't know who David Molnar is, which is obviously a very small percentage of the population, but for that small population, a small percentage, who is David Molnar today?
Man, well, first of all, Jeff, thanks so much for having me on. This is a dream come true of mine. You know, it's just like, I mean, it's just I've made it. You know, man, in the last like 24 hours, there have been like several scammer accounts that they're like faking my name, and then also there's I have a book coming out which we're going to talk about, but there's several books that are like the guide to David Molnar's book, and I'm like, how have you, like, you haven't read the book yet? How are you doing? So that's when you know you've made it, when you have people scamming your name. I'm just kidding. But hey, I am a photographer, an author, and a mentor. I founded a company called the Photo Mentorship, and we teach photographers how to pursue their dreams. And the easy way to explain the Photo Mentorship, it's like Netflix, but for photographers. We have 50 online courses, and you can pick your path and say, I want to be a professional wedding photographer, a real estate photographer, landscape photographer. And we can kind of walk you through the whole thing where it's like, here's how you unbox your camera, here's the on button, and then walk you all the way to being pro. But beyond that, man, I wear this blue t-shirt every single day. 10 years ago, probably before you and I met, I started wearing the same shirt, and just to make life simple, And so what's funny is, when I see people around here, because full disclosure, I live at the beach now, and I don't wear a shirt that often, just for like interviews. I texted Jeff before. I was like, should I wear a shirt? He's like, yeah, probably. He said, but pants are optional. And I was like, that's why I'm not wearing pants right now. But anyways, I decided to wear this shirt, like that way it was just made it easy, made it to where it's like I didn't have to make, there's so many decisions that we have to make in life, whether it's with our kids or our family or spouse or a business. And this was just a way for me to, have one decision for me already made.
Dude, I love that, because like it takes, I mean, for those, when you really think about, those are when you're getting dressed in the morning,
yeah,
picking out the shirt, picking out the pants, picking out the shoes, if you don't lay this out the night before, and like, and David, you can relate to this, having 4 kids, like, there's also the challenges of helping them get dressed as well.
Oh, yeah.
But what I love, because for those that don't know this, I think Steve Jobs is probably the one that was kind of made known for this, wearing his like black, turtleneck, always wearing black. And I know successful entrepreneur types that wear like the black t-shirt kind of became this
Mm-hmm.
thing. But I love about you, like you didn't go the black route, right? You went
Mm-mm.
this teal bluish route.
Yeah.
Have you tested different shades of blue, or has it just been teal?
Thank you for addressing that. I have there's no tealing how many shades of blue that I have. Sorry. Sorry. Anyways, I've tried different colors and this is the one that I've landed on, like yeah, this is the one,
It's a
I
good
pretty much
color.
get a dozen shirts on auto ship every 3 or 4 months, and I have 30 or 40 in my drawer, at all
And
times.
is it the same brand, or do you go different
Yeah,
brands?
I mean, I'm a little bit brand agnostic, but I forget what current brand this is, like Next Level Tees or
Okay.
something like that. I forget. It's like, it's a $10 shirt on Amazon. Actually, with inflation, it's like $16 now. It just went up. So I need to sell some books so that I can afford t-shirts.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So here you are, right? Like you've created like this amazing company. Prior to us hitting record, you mentioned you've got like 10 full-time employees, you've got independent
Yeah.
contractors. I mean, you've got like a big team now, right? And I
Yeah.
know for me, like thinking when you grow this thing, you kind of have to like to pinch yourself to like realize, man, like who I am today, where I've grown.
Oh my gosh.
Take us back in time. Take us back to the David Molnar when he's picking up a camera for the first time. And he is that person who doesn't know anything about f-stop, doesn't know anything about ISO.
Hmm.
What was it about cameras that you were so interested, enchanted by, that led you down to where this path to becoming a photographer and who you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jeff, and I picked up a camera for the first time. If you can see me right now, this is my very first camera I ever had.
I love it.
This is a Nikon my dad gave me, and I started, developing film, black and white Ilford HP5 film in the darkroom when I was 14 years old, like 3 or 4 years ago. Just ignore the gray hair. But anyway, and the 4 kids later and all that stuff. But I started when I was 14 and then just did it for fun. Fast forward a few years later, I'm 18 years old and I am an undefeated wrestler. Not WWF, like competitive wrestling in high school. I'm a senior in high school, and I'm going for college scholarships. And I don't know if you know this story, Jeff, but like I'm going for college scholarships.
I
I'm like
cannot picture you like in a wrestling singlet at all. I mean, I'm like,
oh
I know
yeah,
my
oh
brain went
yeah,
there, but
all the spandex, man. Like that was me, sweaty and just yeah, it's awesome. Anyways, but yeah, that was me. Honestly, like I was a competitive wrestler in high school, and I was undefeated my senior year. I got fifth in the state my junior year, and I was expected to win the state championship my senior year. And then on Christmas Eve, which is 2 months into the 4 month season, so halfway through, I got in a tragic car accident. I was driving 60 miles per hour, probably 62, 63, in a 55 because I only go 7 or 8 miles over. And another car hit me head on, like head on collision, going about the same speed. So it was like hitting a brick wall at 60 or at like 120 freaking miles per hour.
wow.
I woke up in the hospital. I didn't know what happened. It wasn't my fault. My legs didn't work. And you have to understand, like at this point in my life, everything, all the energy, all of my dreams are like, I want to win the state championship and I want to, make good on these college scholarship offers. Cause we are talking to UNC Chapel Hill and Appalachian State and all these schools in North Carolina and a couple other states, for me to potentially go wrestle there. And so I'm just like, I need to follow through. I need to achieve my goal of doing that, and then go and get school paid for, because my family didn't have a lot of money, and it was either don't go to college or take out a crap ton of debt. And so I was working my butt off to try to do that. And then that day, like all my dreams came to a crashing halt. Christmas
Literally.
Eve, literally, yeah. And yeah, 100%. And my legs didn't work. I had knee surgeries on both my legs, broke my foot, had like my whole body was black and blue. And, like they just said, you are lucky to be alive, you know? And what was interesting is I had been given a car a couple months before this. Okay. I was driving the family's Nissan Sentra, which is a dinky little sedan. No offense to Sentra drivers. It's not a very like beefy car. Okay. And this lady who was like a missionary at our church, said, God told me to give you my Volvo station wagon. But you have to understand, like, this was not a nice car. This car was old enough to buy beer at that time. And I wasn't. I was only 18. This car was like 3 or 4 years older than me. It was a 1981 mustard yellow, rusted like crazy,
Yes.
disgusting looking Volvo station wagon with the seats falling apart. And this lady's telling my parents, God told me to give you this car. And I'm like, crap, because I'm like, you just want to get rid of this thing so someone else will give you a nicer car. So my parents were like, great, we'll give the Nissan Sentra to my older sister and you can drive this car, David. I was like so sad and depressed. Well, fast forward, that car saved my life, because if I was driving
Oh
that
my
Sentra, there's
gosh.
no chance that I would have survived. The bumper of the safest car in the world was in my kneecap, and it was the Volvo station wagon. So how did I get into photography? I'm going to get there. All right. So basically, I was, I was mad at God at that point in my life, and I'm going through physical therapy. I watched the guy that I pinned win the state
Mm,
championship.
mm.
And this was like all my dreams, And I liked photography in high school, but after the car accident, I'm sitting around flipping through surf magazines and I get inspired to kind of go more into photography. And so I use photography kind of as therapy for me initially to kind of recover and get through this season of anxiety and depression and wondering, what the heck am I going to do, in my life? So that was kind of like what started steering me towards photography.
Wow. Wow,
And then
dude.
it was
Like
just easy. It was an overnight success after that.
just like that. Just like that.
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. Like I remember you sharing about an accident. But man, like just the whole station, the Volvo station wagon, lady is at your church that felt like God told her to give you this, and
Yeah.
and you were actually were driving it. Like, I mean, and people saw you. I mean, that's so bold and brave.
Oh, I was so embarrassed, but I just decided to rock it. I was like an 18-year-old quirky kid, and I was like, you know what? Whatever. I'm poor. It's fine. Like it's all good. You
So
know?
at what point, I mean, so you're using photography as a therapeutic outlet to
Yeah.
deal with, just what literally is like a that's shocking that you're even walking, right? So
Right.
at what point does this thing become is it a side hustle? Is it like I want to focus on this full time? Like when did you actually kind of turn it from like a hobby into something that started generating a little bit of money?
So what's interesting is, photography is tricky to know when you're ready to go pro, or even to call yourself a photographer, right? There's no bar
Yeah.
exam, historically speaking, for photography, And it was hard to learn how to be a photographer, not just how to take good pictures, but to actually understand the business, how to market yourself, how to become legit, and how to get people
Because
to
this is
refer you,
like
all these different
before
things.
like Facebook pages, social
Yeah, dude.
media, like people
Dude,
aren't tagging you when uploading their funny
this
post. Yeah.
this is pre MySpace. I didn't have MySpace at the time. I was using a Zanga site. It was like an early version of a blog. Most people don't even remember that. It was like an early form of social media. Yeah, it was before all that stuff. And okay, so I took a year off, yeah, as I was learning to walk again. And I went to by the time I went here, I could walk just fine, but I went through months of physical therapy and therapy with photography as well. I took a year off, went to a Christian nonprofit organization that put on youth events. And during that year, I got to photograph some concerts that were at their events, and I got to practice a little bit. But I didn't even have a camera. I didn't own a camera. All I had was this old film camera, and they were too cheap to pay for film. So, eventually they had a digital camera that they just let me borrow. Okay. And I wanted, like, after I started photographing a few concerts, I wanted to photograph my favorite band. And my favorite band at the time was a band called Switchfoot. All right. And they had a record out called The Beautiful Letdown. And they had this song on there that it was like, we were meant to live for so much more. I know I have horrible singing voice. My podcast co-host Rich Coleman is like, "Have you always been tone deaf or what?" I'm like,
We'll try
"Shut
to
up."
edit that out, or
We're like,
edit that. Maybe give you some background vocals to help you
yeah,
out a little bit.
give me some BGVs. Yeah, absolutely. But there's a song where it's like, we were meant to live for so much more, and this other song in the record called Dare You to Move, and they just inspired me and helped me come out of, that, and photography kind of helped me come out of, some of my depression. And they were my favorite band. I was so inspired by them, and I wanted to photograph them and give them the photos for free. All right. And I'm not getting paid. I've never been paid at this point. I'm a kid with a camera, borrowing a camera from the nonprofit. And I started asking around, and I was asking people like, is there any one that has any contacts with the band Switchfoot? And my friends were like, no, 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 no. And then one of my friends, after asking for a few months, was like, you know what? I don't know the band, but I think my boss does. And she was like, I can ask her if she'll introduce you and try to get you in backstage at this concert coming up. And I was like, oh, that's like that. Like, your boss is like that beautiful, like older, like hot girl, like that like I stuttered in front of in the hallway. It's like that hot girl at school that you're like nervous to talk to. I'm a 19-year-old kid. Okay. So I'm like, I'm not like, I haven't grown into my confidence at this point yet. And so she was like, I can ask her and see if she'll like connect you with the band. Somehow, by the grace of God, her boss agreed to connect me with the band and get me in. All right. And I borrowed the Nissan Sentra that my parents gave to my sister, right? Because we were both at this nonprofit at this
Oh,
point.
because
And
the station wagon's like total at this point, right? I mean, that's
totaled.
done.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
gone.
yeah,
It's gone.
yeah.
I don't have a car. Because mine was gone, right? And so I borrowed my sister's car, formerly my car, and drove like across the state of Texas to go to this concert. The car was making weird noises. I thought it was going to break down, but I was like, I don't care as long as I can shoot Switchfoot. I get there and I go to the will call counter, and the lady like starts looking for my name, because I'm trying to get it backstage. I'm trying to like shoot side stage, shoot the pictures of the concert. And she's like looking, and it was like, I feel like it was like 20 minutes. She's like looking, and she's like, so sorry, I can't find your name on the list.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
remember and I'm like, I have told all my friends and family and everyone at this organization, I'm going to photograph Switchfoot. I'm like super excited about it. I drove across the freaking state, like 6 or 7 hours to get there. And my name isn't on the list. And the first thing that I thought, Jeff, was, you know what? Like, they must have like seen my crappy website and realized I'm not a real photographer. They know that I'm a fraud, that I'm a fake. Because remember, I don't believe necessarily that I'm a real photographer at this point. Even though I've been practicing for years, even though I've done a bunch of test shoots and photographed other concerts successful, I remember thinking like, my favorite band in the world thinks I suck and they didn't want to put me on the list. That's what I thought at the moment, right? And so I reluctantly like got the number to my friend's boss and like called. I'm like nervous to talk to this beautiful girl, right? And I called him like, hey, like my name's not on the list and I don't know what to do. And she was like, hey, hold on a second. She's like, sometimes the name is just in the back, like the backstage entrance. Maybe it's not a will call. And I was like, okay. She's like, I want you to stay on the phone, shoulders back, act confident, like you are supposed to be there. Okay. Like you're supposed to be there. Like you're not some super fan, like you belong. Project confidence. And I was like, okay, this is this older, beautiful girl telling me this. I'm like, yes, ma'am. And I walked to the back door and she's like, I want you to tell them that you are David Molnar, the photographer. And I'm like, but I'm like arguing. I'm like, but I'm not really a photographer. I'm just like a kid with a, she's like, tell them you're David Molnar, the photographer,
The photographer.
the photographer. And I'm like,
Yes.
this is like,
Yes.
like I said, there's no bar exam. I'm like
Oh my
waiting for
gosh,
someone
this is
else to
awesome.
pick me, to be the photographer, right? Or
You've never met this.
to
Have you met this person, this lady before? I mean, no, you did because you stuttered over your words.
I had stuttered in the hallway,
Okay.
and I remember thinking she's beautiful. And I was hearing these stories about this girl, and like hearing that like all these lead singers of bands, because she was like kind of power, she could like put 50,000 people, she could put a band in front of 50,000 people in one event. Like
Yeah.
that's the clout she had in the music industry
Yeah.
at the time. And all these like lead singers of bands were like trying to date her and she was like turning them down. So I was just like nervous to talk to her, and she was very gracious, and she was, telling me to go to the back door. So I did. I walked up to the back door, and there's like this 350-pound UFC fighter back there that looks like he could bite my head off easily. And I'm like,
I'll
hello,
pin you. I
sir.
can pin you.
Yeah. I could pin someone half your size. But I was like, hello, sir. No, I'm just kidding. I tried to project as confidently as I could. And I walked up and like, I'm feeling so insecure and like, don't want to get turned down again. And feeling like a complete failure, like for the 18th time that day. And I told him, I was like, I'm David Molnar, the photographer. And he looked down at his list. He didn't say anything. I'm like, I don't know if my name was on the list. Like, I have no idea. But he opened the door and walked me up to Switchfoot's dressing room. And I walk in and there's this warm glow in the room. And I walk in and the guys were there and like, hey, how's it going? What are you doing here? They like didn't know I was supposed to be there either. And they're like, okay, cool. Like, what are you taking pictures for? I'm like, just for you. I'm going to give them to you. And they were super great. I went and photographed the concert once they went on stage, poured my freaking heart into it. And then they ended up loving the pictures. I had to burn the pictures onto a CD drive. Remember that? Like CD drives, like CD burners. Maybe it was a DVD drive, I forget. But I remember like the CD burner failed like 3 or 4 times. So I had to try like 4 times to burn the pictures onto the CD, FedEx them to their manager so they could get them. And then this is before Google Drive and Dropbox and all that stuff, right? And they ended up loving the pictures and saying they wanted to buy this particular picture. They wanted to pay me money to put it on their beautiful letdown World Tour t-shirt. I mean, to this 19-year-old kid, I'm just like, holy cow, like my favorite band likes my pictures and they want to pay me money. And I was just trying to give them the pictures. Like they could have used the pictures for free. I was like, maybe put photo credit on the photo, like just whatever. And then they're like, oh, and we also want to take your photo and put it on the next album, like as one of the pictures on the insert of the album. I mean, I'm a 19-year-old kid. I just got paid $400 and my favorite band likes at least one of my pictures. I mean, I'm on top of the world. But what was interesting is it's like I became a photographer that day, and it wasn't because of what you think. It wasn't because the band validated me as a photographer. It wasn't because they paid me money making me a professional photographer. By the way, that was the first time anyone in the world ever paid me money for photography. Switchfoot. It was mind-blowing. I didn't become a photographer that day because of getting paid or validation by other people. I became a photographer the moment that I proclaimed to the world, that I said it out loud, I am David Molnar, the photographer.
Oh, I love it, dude.
That's the moment. And one other thing.
I have goosebumps, man. I have goosebumps. Yeah. Like I almost see this like as a t-shirt too. Like I'm David Molnar, the photographer.
It's like, well, like, oh, is your name David? Like, no. Well, then why are you wearing that t-shirt? I don't know.
There's so much of the story that I love, but I love that this lady, who you just were nervous around,
had a crush. I was crushing.
Had a crush on.
Yeah.
But like God used her to be able to make you say it out loud. Yeah. Which ended up becoming just this belief, like, oh, like, yes, this affirmation, like I am a photographer. No, I'm sorry, I am the photographer.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
Can I tell you something cooler too?
Oh, please.
Yeah. That girl's name is Tammy. And now her name is Tammy Molnar. I married her.
Oh my God. You just set me up for that, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
you totally set me up. I had no idea.
Yeah. I mean, I had no idea either. I didn't think I had a chance in the world. And I don't know, somehow I tricked her into marrying me like a year or two later.
Wow. That was your wife. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks, Switchfoot.
Yeah. Wow. Ken, I want to go back. There was something that I want to highlight as well. And you kind of shared it, but for all these new aspiring entrepreneurs, or maybe they're, in their career and they're looking for something different, I just want to rehash like what you went through. So you drove this decrepit Nissan Sentra, I don't know how many hours, but before that, like you made all these attempts to find out who the manager of what the band was, to get that contact. And then you drive not even like where you're going. If you're going to break down in the middle of Texas,
I had to
all
MapQuest directions. Remember MapQuest?
oh yeah,
It tells
yeah.
you like pull off in a cornfield, and you're like, dang it, you know.
And just some, I'm curious, how far was the drive?
It was from like Tyler, Texas to San Antonio, and like I can't remember if it was 5 hours or 8 hours, somewhere
Okay.
in between that. I can't
So
remember. A
like
long way,
five,
a long
yeah,
drive.
5 hour drive, and then you pour your heart into this session at the concert. Like there's another
Yeah.
3 or 4 hours on top of that. Then you got to drive back. Hope that you don't break down. And I mean, this was all for a hope, right? Like taking a huge risk that this would even pan out to anything. You had no idea. But I
Yeah.
just want to highlight, because sometimes people, they get so stuck in like, gosh, I don't know if I want to do that. Is it worth it? I mean, you don't know. And I mean, in this case, like you did it. Not only did you become the photographer, but you also met your spouse in the process. Or I mean, you, I guess, further solidified, because you're now, hey,
Well, yeah, I mean,
am
but I
the
wouldn't have really
photographer.
met her had it not been for this occasion. You know, like
Mhm.
I met her on behalf of like by asking her if she would do this. You know, so
That
yeah, it
is,
was 100%. Well, what's interesting is, I'm trying to think if it was Earl Nightingale or Earl Nightingale talks about we become what we think about. Napoleon Hill talks about it in Think and Grow Rich, and like I think they say like the definiteness of I'm going to botch this quote, but it's like, um, gosh, man, I'm like the secret to success is like having a definiteness of purpose, the pursuit of a worthy goal. And, so many people will quit before they even start. They'll be like, nah, that's not possible.
mhm.
Like, and it was one of those things where it's like, if you have to go for it. You have to go for things, and they're not always going to succeed. There's so many things that I've gone for that I've fallen flat on my face. But if I hadn't have gone for this specific thing, I may never have gotten the encouragement and that early success that got me my wife, but also got me my first paying gig and gave me so much encouragement to pursue my dream. So you have to pursue a worthy goal with all you've got.
Dude, that's, I mean, that's what an amazing story. And then, from there, just looking at the back of your book, and also your site, your clients include like Google and Sony. I love this. His work has been seen on millions of Pepsi cans.
Yeah.
um, the other thing too I found interesting, which I never even thought about, is as a photographer, there isn't like some credential or some certification. I mean, it basically becomes like, and correct me if I'm wrong, like who have you photographed or where has
Yep.
your work been featured? I mean, that basically becomes like your validation. And how
Yeah.
cool to have like your band become your one of your favorite bands at the time become like your first validation in that. So
Yeah.
from there, like what was we don't have to every step of the way, but like when do we go from photographing Switchfoot to now we're working with bigger brands, bigger companies? What did that process look like?
Which was not overnight. Like I'm I'm 19 years old when the Switchfoot stuff happened. Okay. And I made $400. And I mean, I hate to break it to you, but $400 is not a lot is not enough to retire on, I felt like rich at the moment, but I'm a 19-year-old kid and I'm like, I can buy 3 packs of Twinkies. It's great. But basically I had to kind of go back to the drawing board. I had a little notch on my belt, and it was cool to be able to use that as an accolade. But at the end of the day, I kind of had decided at that point, I want to photograph album covers. And there's the distinction between being a kid photographing a concert and kind of getting lucky to take a really good picture, to take a photo that the band likes or whatever and wants to use. I'm not going to say anyone can do that, but like I definitely got a little bit lucky for sure. But to photograph album covers where, a record label is going to be like, hey, here's this, shoot that we're going to spend $90,000 on or whatever. By the time they're paying for the wardrobe in the studio and, all of the people involved in the whole shoot, like to trust the marketing for this next project to this specific photographer to photograph the album cover. The difference between being a kid photographing a concert and then getting hired by a record label to do the actual promo pictures for an album cover, the disparity is so vast. It's just like mind blowing and mind numbing. So, and I decided at that point that that's what I wanted to do. Well, actually a little bit later, I decided that, and that path took me a long time. But what happened is I basically went to Nashville after following my stint at that nonprofit. And I started assisting other photographers. I started carrying sandbags, cleaning toilets, getting coffee, sweeping up the studio, setting up light stands, you name it. I did that for years for other photographers. And I never forgot what it was like because I was just their gopher. Like I was the assistant. Sometimes I was the fourth assistant down the line of assistants for the photographer. Like it wasn't like I was the one assistant that got to do all the stuff and take pictures sometimes. It's like, heck no. Like if someone had to run an errand, it was me. I was like half the time I wasn't even on the shoot. I had to go, get coffee from the nearest coffee shop and wait in line or something. But and I wasn't there like as far as those photographers are concerned, I wasn't there to learn. I was there to be their gopher,
Yeah.
to be part Sherpa and part, like waiter, essentially. But it took years of me doing that to pick up some things along the way. And then I started shooting weddings, to pay the bills. Lewis Schiff in his book Business Brilliant says, do what you love, but always, always, always follow the money. And, for a period of time, I wanted to photograph album covers. I wanted to be a photographer, but I couldn't make any money at that because record labels didn't trust me at that point. I had to kind of build my career, build my connections, build my portfolio before anyone would be willing to trust me. All right. So you fast forward another 7 or 8 years past that Switchfoot early success where I made $400. Okay. And I've worked my butt off shooting weddings, and we actually made a good living shooting weddings. But what I wanted to do was pursue, album cover photography. And um, I my wife, when she moved to Nashville, I followed her. Excuse me, I followed her to Nashville. She took a job at the management of the band Skillet. So she worked with Zach Kelm, who manages the band Skillet and a few other bands. And so, we knew the band Skillet at that point because like, obviously, she was working with them all the time, but it wasn't until 5 or 6 years after working with them that they were willing to give me a chance. And that's after I had put the hard work in for on a ton of other shoots with indie artists and all these people, building my portfolio for free. And then eventually like $100 here or there, or $500 or whatever it was. When they got a new band member, this awesome British girl named Jen joined the band to be the drummer. And they were like, we need a new press photo like ASAP, because our new album cover photo shoot is not for another 6 months. But right now we need a quick photo to represent the new band member, in our band. And they're like, we're going to give David a chance to do this low pressure shoot and see how it goes, So, but this was like 5 or 6 years after knowing them. It wasn't like, oh, you just knew. It's like, no, I had to earn my place and show them that I could do it with these, low budget shoots, indie bands first. And then they gave me the opportunity to do this press shoot. So I did it. And this was a cheap shoot. It was like not a lot of money. It was just an opportunity for me. Flew to Tulsa, Oklahoma, did the shoot right before one of their concerts. And they loved the press photo. Looking back, I don't think it was very good, but great. Thankfully, they were like, okay, cool. We're going to give him the shot to do our next, album cover photo shoot, which was like, $100,000 shoot with, Atlantic Records and all these things. By the time they're spending all the money in the wardrobe, flying everyone out, renting the studios, all these things, it was like this crazy huge shoot. Right. Wow. And I'm like this like 26 or 7-year-old kid, like doing this thing, just once again, stepping out of my comfort zone, doing something I'm scared to do, but like, I'm going to do this. I'm David Molnar, the photographer, right? Right. And so I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. And keep in mind, like, it's not like I'm just starting photography. I've been working my butt off for years pursuing this. Okay. Building my portfolio, building my equipment, building my experiences. And so we do this shoot, and then like I pour my heart into it, and I crushed it. I crushed the shoot, did like give it 190%. Okay. And the photo, they used the photo on their album cover. The press photos were everywhere. The album went on to be their best-selling album of all time. As of 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know what it is now, but it had sold over 2 million records. People actually bought the CD, like, because people started streaming, and it was like people stopped buying CDs and stuff at that point. The album sold over 2 million records as of 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe it's at 3 million now. I don't know. And it was just like, it was one of those moments where it was like, all of the sudden, the record labels in Nashville and New York and LA knew who I was. And they started calling, my phone started ringing off the hook. Who is this new photographer who arrived overnight? David Molnar. And I'm like, guys, you don't remember, but I was cleaning the toilets after you used them in the other photographer studio as his assistant. I got you coffee, but instead I reintroduced myself as if it was the first time because they didn't remember me. Like, hey, I'm David Molnar, you know? And then all of a sudden it was like I arrived on the set, but they didn't see the blood, sweat, and tears and years that went into becoming the photographer worthy of being hired by record labels.
Obviously, them selling 2 million, maybe 3 million records. I mean, it wasn't the music, right? It was obviously the
100% the photo.
The photo.
100% the photo. No, it's a great album.
But how
yeah,
cool though, right? Because every time the album came up, it's like, that's my photo. That's my photo. That's my photo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's awesome, man. So what a great story, dude. I mean, like, I've learned some stuff about you as far as just the journey and all the hard work that you put into it. And then I think when you and I met, you had already began that process of, I'll call it a transition. You know, you go from photographing band album covers, weddings, to, hey, like, I want to show other people how to do this, not just, I think, and you could speak to this, right? I think there's a few different audiences. I think you have those that are just interested, like soccer moms that just want to know how to use a camera.
Yeah.
And then you have the others that, man, like, I would love to make a little bit of extra money since it, you know, because it's, I mean, I've got like, I mean, this is hilarious, right? I mean, not including the camera I'm recording on, but like just in my own office, like, you know, I've got my Canon here, I've got my Lumix Pants GH5 over here. I don't know how to take pictures with these. I can record some video, kind of sometimes, but as far as like, I'm trying to take a picture for my wife with our kids, I'm like, f-stop what? ISO? I have no idea.
Yeah.
So there definitely is a learning curve. But talk a little bit about that transition into where you're at right now with the business operation you got going on.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, the reality is becoming a photographer was freaking hard. It was, you know, finding a mentor was really hard too. I had some awesome people that helped me out and answered my questions over the years, but there wasn't like one definitive mentor that was like, here's the path, here's all the steps you need to take, and let me guide you along this whole journey. And I remember being frustrated by that. And I remember thinking like, gosh, if I ever make it, if I figure this out, I want to be the mentor to other photographers that I didn't have and so desperately wanted and needed, you know? And that's why, you know, my online persona is David Molnar, your photography mentor. And that's what I aspire to be, is to help photographers pursue their dreams and take out the confusion that I had and the frustration of, you know, years and years of trial and error, and make a clear path to help photographers pursue their dreams. And that's why I founded the Photo Mentorship, which, like I talked about, has a bunch of courses in it. And then I wrote this book called Learning to See, a Photographer's Guide. I wrote this book to be a guide for photographers to pursue, you know, the journey of becoming a photographer. In the book, there's 5 steps that we talk about in both the Photo Mentorship and for the first time in written format, you know, in the book. And we talk about the 5 steps to basically becoming a photographer. And the first 4 steps are for anyone that is interested in taking pictures. It's learning to see like a photographer, then learning to shoot like a photographer. Sounds like you need this. Like learning the technical side of, you know, ISO and aperture and shutter speed and all that stuff, which is actually pretty simple. If you want, I'd be happy to give you access to my course called Master Your Camera. But I also write about it in the book as well in chapters 6 and 7. But so the steps are learning to see like a photographer, learning to see yourself like a photographer, like I did, and then also learning to see the world like a photographer, learning how to craft beautiful stories and use the tricks, the tricks and the skills to tell a powerful story. Then it's learning how to shoot what you see, you know, to do it technically. Okay, changing your aperture and your ISO and your shutter speed to be able to achieve what you're actually seeing in your head. Step 3 is to edit to recreate the emotion that you felt. Because how many times have you taken a picture and it pales in comparison to what it actually felt like, right? Because that's because our cameras, as amazing as they are, whether you have a $5,000 rig like this or a $500 rig like this, as amazing as these cameras are, they can't produce the same quality. They're crappy quality compared to what we can see with our God-given eyes. Like God has made these amazing pieces of biotechnology in our eyes that can see so many infinite more details in the highlights in the sky and the clouds and the tones in the sunset and all the shadows beneath the horizons, and whether it's the ocean or the trees or whatever you're looking at. We can see so much more detail with our eyes than our cameras can capture. And that's why a lot of times your photos will pale in comparison. Even if you do everything technically right when you take the picture, you have to follow that step of editing to recreate the emotion so that your viewers can see and feel what you saw and felt when you were actually taking the picture in the first place. Step 4 in the book is how to develop into the specialty of your choice. So if you're the Instagram husband, like you want to develop into taking natural light portraits. If you want to be a landscape photographer, landscape photography, wildlife photography, real estate photography, wedding photography, we have paths that photographers can take and go all the way to pro in the photo mentorship. And in the book, we talk about those different paths and describe them and help you kind of pick one of those paths. And the 5th step in the book is earn. This is the optional step for people who want to actually make money, whether it's part-time or full-time, because the book is for anyone who wants to pursue photography, whether for passion or profit. And that's why I say the 5th step is optional, because not everyone wants to make money in photography, and that's okay. I use photography as therapy. I hear so many of my students say, like, I'm doing this for the joy, for the hobby, for the therapy of it. And I'm like, that's awesome. You do that. But some people want to make a living and provide for their family. And it's absolutely possible to do that and to make a fantastic living, multiple six-figure living shooting photos, if that's the career path that you want to take.
So just like look at your website, it says that you've had over 200,000 students who are becoming great photographers. So you have had a chance to mentor quite a few individuals
Couple
over
people.
the years, just a couple people. What is just one story that comes to mind of one of your students? You don't have to name their names, but is there anyone that comes to mind that's just it's just one of those stories? It's like, gosh, this is why I started doing this.
Yeah.
Anybody come to mind? Obviously not me, because I don't know how to turn on my camera.
No, it's not you. Just kidding. No, I've learned a lot of other things from you. But yeah, we have so many stories. We hear stories every day. Because in the photo mentorship, which has thousands of members, and we have an incredible community. And the cool thing is we get to see and hear and share stories and encourage them and answer their questions in real time. So it's like we're flooded with people. But one of my favorite illustrations is Nada Salvatore. I actually write about her in the introduction to this book. Nada Salvatore came to the United States with I think it was like $20 or $30 to her name, and she didn't speak more than 10 words of English. She came over on a volleyball scholarship, when she was, I think, 19 years old, 18, 19 years old. And she worked her way up to becoming a doctor of physical therapy. She's an exceptional person. Okay. But what's interesting is she took my online class on how to master your camera, and then took every other class that I had after that. And within 3 months, having never picked up her camera before, she wanted to take better photos of her kids, so she decided to take pictures. Within 3 months, she booked her first professional gig. 3 months later, I mean, it took me years, like 5 years to get paid, she booked her first gig. And then that first gig, I think it was 120 more gigs that she booked in the next 12 months.
Oh my goodness.
So within 15 months of my first class that she took with me, she booked 120 gigs. But her first one wasn't until 3 months later. She went through the foundational steps, got good, and then booked 120 gigs. And then almost made 6 figures that year, ended up making 6 figures in photography the next year. And now I'm not even allowed to say how much money she's making because she's a freaking baller. But I mean, the difference between the years and years of struggle that I had to go through, and then providing a clear 5-step formula, which we teach the 5 steps in this book, Learning to See. And that's the same path that Nada followed to be able to have just astronomical success that I could have only dreamed of in the early decade of my career, So it's been really encouraging. Nada's one of many, many stories of people that have taken off like that. But she's now, I mean, I have to say this, like, she's a special person. Like, not everyone's going to have that sort of success, but to see someone follow our path and have that success is like, wow, this really works. Like, this is
Mhm.
really cool.
Yeah, and it's so cool, man, to see that fruit. And that's one of the reasons why I do what I do. Just trying to share some of the experience, some of the hardships, so that we can prevent them from falling in those same potholes, making those same silly mistakes, and then have an accelerated path of success. Like, it just feels good, right? It's like, it's not
Oh
so
yeah.
much our kids, but it feels like, it's like, hey, I get a chance to like pour into somebody and to see them have like massive success in a much faster clip than, we ever did. It actually feels really cool. And there's part of me like, gosh, why did it take me so long? But
Yeah, well, they're getting to learn from the benefit of your wisdom and
yes.
experience from
Yeah.
struggling through it for years. I agree with you. I think, like, I have photos that millions and millions of people have seen. Like, I don't know. I mean, probably a billion people have seen my photos. Maybe not, but close to it. All right. And that's cool. But like what's even more cool is helping other people pursue their dreams. Like, it's cool to have photos that millions of people will see, but I just actually love helping, individual people, like individual photographers, achieve their dreams and have those aha moments. I actually get more joy and more like gratification out of seeing other people have success than just me, taking a photo that gets seen by a lot of people. So I echo that. It's a privilege to be able to mentor other people and to see their success is just, it's the best feeling in the world.
Dude, that's awesome, man. Obviously, for those that are listening, they probably didn't get a chance to see the book that you've held up a few times. But for those that are interested in the book and also checking out what you've got going online, let us know the best places to look up Mr. David Molnar,
Yeah, well, the
the
book,
photographer.
the photographer. The book is called Learning to See. If you can, find it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, everywhere books are sold. You can also find out more information on learningtoseebook.com. And then I'm David Molnar. You can go to davidmolnar.com or find me, David Molnar, on any social media channel.
Is there a,
Molnar. It's a weird one.
is there a social media channel that you are more, I don't know, more active on?
I'm pretty active on Instagram and Facebook.
Got it. Okay.
Not so much TikTok, but I have an
Yeah.
account with one post on
I need to see
it.
you doing some TikToks. I don't know what that even means, but
Just dancing. Yeah.
awesome, dude. Well, this has been great, man. I've learned more about your story, and I think you've given a lot of good nuggets of wisdom for those that are interested. And this doesn't even apply to just photography, right? It applies to chasing your passion, trying something new, willing to just be bold and brave, uh, and experiment. So, yeah, man, I really appreciate the time you've given us.
Jeff, thanks so much for having me on, man. This is a blast. It's an honor to be on here with you.